What is up, guys? Today let me introduce you to Reganmian, one of my all-time favorite noodle dishes. I actually wanted to make a video on them for a pretty long time because I think that combo of textures and flavors makes this one of the best Chinese comfort foods ever. There's just one thing, this dish is not just a Chinese dish, it's actually from the city of Wuhan. Yes, that Wuhan. Right now, as I'm shooting this video, the city is still under lockdown as China and the world are trying to fight the COVID-19 outbreak. So for a while I thought, maybe not the best time to make a video on Reganmian. But then recently I noticed something, which is that for most people outside of China, this virus is the first and only time they have ever heard of Wuhan, and maybe even the last. Even when you try to Google it, there's Wikipedia, and then there are a bunch of articles about the coronavirus. And I think that needs to change. I mean, Wuhan is a huge city with a super interesting history, culture, and of course, you guessed it, amazing food. So I called up my two favorite Chinese food experts, Chris and Steph from Chinese Cooking Demystified. Hands down, my favorite and the most thorough Chinese cooking channel out there.
So we live in Shunde, which is a city a little bit south of Guangzhou. It's been weird. You can't really go outside. You need to wear a mask even you're just going right downstairs. There's basically nobody on the street. Yeah, the whole country is staying in.
We have a ton of time, maybe a little bit too much time.
Do you have access to all the ingredients you like right now, or do you have to get creative?
Almost everything.
Yeah, now it's back. Yeah, it's a little bit easier in Guangdong, right? You know, we're not in Hubei. You know, we had a couple rough weeks there for basically getting stuff in, getting some supplies. You'd need to order from the grocery store on the app.
But now it's been a lot better. Things are a little bit more expensive, but it's still okay. Yeah, at least we can get cilantros back.
Yeah. Do you think that Hubei food is the most underrated cuisine in China?
One of the most underrated. You don't really hear people talk about Hubei food. The whole province itself has a lot to offer. It has so much rich produce.
Yeah, lotus root is a big one,
yeah,
but
crawfish.
I would say if you can imagine, if you've never had Hubei food, I want you in your brain to kind of imagine a mix between Shanghai, Yangtze River Delta kind of cuisine and Sichuan food. One of the famous ones is mianyang sanzhong, right?
The sanzhong,
yeah,
it's the three steams. Steamed meatball coated in sticky rice. Steamed pork belly coated in spiced and seasoned rice flour.
Yeah, fenjin roe.
And then often it's steamed pumpkin or some kind of root vegetables in it.
Whenever we go home to the US, my family's favorite thing is the pearl meatballs, basically, the meatballs with, sticky rice coating kind of thing. It's a great cuisine.
It's everywhere.
Right.
You'll see people walking with a bowl of Reganmian. Bus drivers stopping at the red light, take out a bowl of Reganmian and scarf down a couple. You'll see people on a bike. They really go out of their way of having their breakfast, but it's everywhere.
I've been to Wuhan once, very briefly. I've tried it there. To anyone watching who wants to see a full-on authentic recipe, I will 100% recommend your video. I want to try simplifying it down as much as I can. So in your opinion, what is negotiable and what is non-negotiable?
Sesame.
Right, sesame paste, you cannot miss that.
Yeah, non-negotiable.
It's the soul and the core of the dish. Alkaline noodles, because it provides that kind of, the signature bite of the noodles. Sesame oil is also in, right?
Let's cut. Oh, scallion.
Oh yeah, scallion, yes.
Scallion. You have to have scallion. Yeah, bunch of scallion. Yeah.
Pickle will be between non-negotiable and negotiable because you do want that kind of a little bit of that sour crunchiness. To add the complexity would be a little bit of Lushui. Chinese mixed spice broth.
Master stock?
If you're worried now that this is gonna be a complicated one, relax. I got you. First, let's talk about noodles, specifically alkaline noodles. You could make them at home, just follow any old ramen noodle recipe, but I understand if you don't, so let's hit the Asian grocery store. The first thing I was looking for were dried alkaline noodles, and I did indeed find some. If you don't read Chinese, just look for the ingredient E500I. Sounds very scary, I know, but it's actually just soda, sodium carbonate. Anyhow, these noods had a different problem. They were too thin. What we need for Reganmian are thick noodles. So how about packaged ramen from the shelf? The thickness looks okay here, they're also alkaline, but they're way too soft and mushy. They are not gonna work. We need something with chew. So how about these refrigerated fresh noodles maybe? So these ones, aside from being a little bit too thin, had a great texture and were my favorite overall. However, I understand it's not very easy to find fresh alkaline noodles. And so as I was almost giving up, I found these noodles. I know they look super basic, but I think they might just be what we need. They're thick enough and we can cook them to the degree we want to get the classic al dente Reganmian feel. The thing is, they're not alkaline noodles, but we're gonna use a hack and cook them in a pot of water with a tablespoon of baking soda per liter of water. That should get you pretty close to the texture and flavor of an alkaline noodle. Now, cook them until they're just about al dente. Like, get them out a tiny bit too early so they still have a little bit of a bite. In the streets of Wuhan, they'd actually cook the noodles even less, so they're like only par cooked. But then they do it in a bigger batch, toss them in sesame oil so they don't stick, and then when you order, they can just grab a handful of those, toss them in hot water, boil them up for like a minute or so, take them out and add the toppings. But that's for street food style convenience. You don't have to do that at home. Just don't overcook the noodles, add the toppings straight away and eat. Speaking of toppings, this is our next challenge. As you can see in Steph and Chris's video, there's a myriad of things that goes on top of Reganmian. And to make it even more complicated, one of these things is a Chinese braising liquid called Lushui, which in itself contains a lot of different things. Now, obviously, I thought about how we can make this a bit easier at home, and here's what I came up with. If you put in the work once and you make these two seasonings ahead of time, you can actually make a lot of very convincing Reganmian in just about the time it takes to cook the noodles. Plus, these seasonings should keep for a good few weeks if you keep them in the fridge or even on a shelf. So you can have semi-instant Reganmian anytime. First, I want to tackle that Lushui issue.
Basically, it's a bunch of soy sauce, can include stock, cannot include stock, and a bunch of spices, and it's all cooked together.
Usually Lushui has like dozens of spices.
Maybe not dozens.
Depends on which one you're doing, but yeah, at least like 5 to 10, I'll say.
Yeah. The thing with Lushui, sometimes you get Reganmian in Shenzhen, and it's just not quite the same. And a big thing is this addition of Lushui. Basically, the Reganmian vendors, they'd often have like beef simmering in the master stock. And so they take some of that and then they also include it. I wouldn't call it non-negotiable, but it's kind of like, for me at least, I really like it in there.
To be very honest with you, I don't feel like simmering beef for hours and hours just so I can add like a spoonful of that broth on top of my noodles. No, but I think that complex and really interesting spice mix of a Lushui, we can make that work. There's not really a set recipe for this, but I picked up a few Chinese spices I had around. You'll find the exact mixture in the description, and you want to add either some beef bouillon powder or, in my case, a dried shiitake mushroom plus a bit of MSG for an umami base. First, run everything through a spice grinder and then add the mixed powder into a few empty tea bags, which now magically allow us to make a quick Lushui in a matter of just minutes. Here's how. Heavily crush a clove of garlic and optionally a slice of ginger. Add the Lushui tea bag, boiling water, and 5 to 10 minutes later, boom. You can also totally use this spice mix for other things, like when you're braising meats or tofu or when you're making a hot pot base. Just throw it right in. Okay, so one very obvious thing is still missing to get that classic Lushui flavor, and that would be soy sauce. You could just add that in when your spice bag is done steeping, but in our case, the soy sauce will be part of the second seasoning. Quite prominently, there's sesame paste. I'm using the traditional black sesame, but regular tahini will work 100%. They're almost identical in taste. Just make sure to add a little bit of water and stir it into a smooth emulsion first before you continue. Now we're gonna add some sesame oil, then some lauganma or any other chili oil will work as well, then both light and dark soy sauce, and we're also adding a few shakes of white pepper, 5 spice, and you guessed it, an optional sprinkle of MSG. Mix everything together, you can thin it out a bit if you like, but we still need a pretty thick paste overall. The reason for that being that we still have to mix this with our instant Lushui, and that of course is gonna thin it out to form our final Reganmian sauce. We're almost ready to go now, but there's still a tiny little bit missing. You're gonna need like a generous amount of fresh scallions chopped as finely as you can, optionally a few sprigs of fresh cilantro, then some crushed peanuts, I think store-bought is completely fine, and then there's preserved radish. So yeah, this is not a must, but I really think that adding those salty, tangy, crunchy bits gives you that like textural contrast that really elevates Reganmian. The good news is that you can buy preserved radish online or at an Asian grocery store. It's really inexpensive and I think it's gonna last you forever. But if you can't find it, I looked into it and I suggest that you don't make it yourself. Unless, of course, you fancy sun-drying radish for a few days. So look, if you can't find the store-bought stuff, I suggest that you either just go for any crunchy pickle. You can also try quick pickling a carrot or a turnip with chilies. It works surprisingly well. I'm gonna share a recipe for that on my Patreon this weekend. Here's this week's challenge for you. Treat yourself and your friends to some Reganmian. Experience the classic flavor of Wuhan and just think about what's behind it.
You know, some of these people, you see online, they're kind of like talking about Wuhan like it's this kind of like no-name backwater place, but it's one of the world's great cities. It's kind of like a university town. One of the big universities here is based out of there. So it has all kind of like the craft beer and music scene that you might expect from that kind of thing.
Wuhan is also a place kind of steeped in history. One side, it's like full of this old European like colonial times architecture. And on the other side, you have like the older style Chinese narrow streets, neighborhoods.
Whenever we're talking about like, oh, we've had to stay inside for a month, or oh, we've had a couple sourcing issues with vegetables for a couple weeks there. The minuscule amount of like hardship that we've been through is absolutely nothing, right, compared to what that city's been through. This is a very intense tragedy that's hit a really cool city. It really bothers me when people are, going around talking about it, where it's like, where's the bat? Oh, go eat virus noodles or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's stupid.
We really hope this will be over soon and Wuhan will recover to its glory.
Huge thank you to Steph and Chris for helping me in figuring this one out. If you haven't checked out their channel yet, you should absolutely go and do that right now. I can't recommend it enough. And yeah, make Reganmian and share it with the world. I'm gonna see you in the next video.